Let me take you back in time to the 1980s through the nostalgia-filled exhibit Dressed to Impress from the Bata Shoe Museum. This exhibit features the coolest shoes of the decade while also talking about very important trends. Here's my conversation with curator Nishi Bassi. So I'm here with Nishi Bassi. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to show us this amazing 80s inspired exhibit. I want to start off touching on, I've always found it so curious how curators have to be so intentional, especially in 2023. And having just heard the amazing talk that you've given outlining every single aspect of this curated exhibit, you've been so intentional throughout, whether it's, gender, talking about women in the workplace, aerobics, fitness, all of these different aspects. As a woman of color in this curated space, I'm curious, why was it so important to you to ensure that this intentionality comes through each literal millimeter of this exhibit?
Yeah, what I really wanted to do is allow for lots of layers of interpretation for visitors when they come in the exhibition. So a visitor can come in, and if they just want to see fabulous 80s shoes, they can do that, and that's wonderful. But for those who want to look at something a little bit more deeper about this decade, that level of interpretation is there as well. And so I'm personally very interested in racial dynamics and gender dynamics and their relationship to capitalism. And so that's something that I wanted to bring through in the text labels, but in a way that feels very accessible. So it was important for me if I could use an artifact to tell a story about inclusion or exclusion or patriarchy or racism, that I could do that. And I'm hoping that some of those stories really resonate with visitors, especially those who haven't heard these stories in museums before.
Absolutely. And I do want to touch on, of course, not everyone will get to hear the amazing talk that you gave running through, but you almost reiterated one of the most iconic speeches in the very trendy Barbie movie about that very difficult dichotomy of being a woman and trying to work, but not being too sexy, but also trying to work out, showing that you're rich in all of these like clin d'oeil, little wink and nod ways. It's absolutely stunning the way that you've put all of that together. Additionally to all of that, you've also ensured to put in little moments of Canadian in here as well. And I was wondering if you could speak to, I saw that you had several Canadian designers who are a part of this exhibit.
Yeah, so we have John Fluevog in the exhibition. We have a wonderful pair of his shoes that are called Winklepickers, and they are pointed toe. It's a pointed toe fashion that was really big with the goth subculture. So it was really great to be able to incorporate a Canadian story there. We also have footwear by Patrick Cox, and I think a lot of people don't realize that the London-based designer Patrick Cox is a Canadian boy. And so he designed footwear for Vivienne Westwood and John Galliano, some of the biggest names of the 80s, before establishing his own brand. And I think I've got 2 pairs of his shoes on display. So that was very exciting to be able to incorporate the Canadian story.
Absolutely. And touching a little bit on sustainability, obviously thinking back to the 80s, I can't imagine that the way that these shoes were made were necessarily as thoughtful as we're trying to be now. And I'm curious, looking forward to the way fashion is today, what are some of the interesting things you've noticed, or maybe even things that you've been taken aback by when you think about what shoes, footwear, textiles were like in the 80s and fast forward now to 2023 and the way we manufacture product?
Yeah, it's really interesting in terms of manufacturing, because the 80s is where a lot of footwear starts being produced abroad, mostly in parts of Asia. And that is one of the reasons why there was a lot of consumerism in this period, because footwear that's being imported from those factories is much cheaper than what was being produced domestically, especially in the US. And that allows for participation in consumerism. In terms of today, something that I find really interesting is, the vintage market right now is so big. Like, people are thrifting. That's such a huge part of how younger generations are being more sustainable. And a lot of them are buying 80s fashion because a lot of the footwear that's in this exhibition is still very stylish. Like, you could wear cowboy boots or riding boots or the Air Jordan 1 Doc Martens. So there is a market out there that actually wants products that were made in the 80s, because it's just the beginnings of fast fashion, but the quality was a bit better. So it's very interesting to see how much people want to thrift that stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny, I was going to touch on that because in every single little like shopping mall display case, you have things that I've seen either on TikTok or on Instagram, whether it's the cowboy boots or the jellies, the Air Force Ones, like all of these things are definitely coming back. And as like an almost not millennial, I see so many things that resonate with my fashion choices. As a curator who also has to wear shoes, what was your favorite piece to put in this exhibit?
I think one of my favorite pieces was the Reebok Freestyle, which came out in '82, and it's because it was so iconic. And the fact that it came out in all these wild and fun colors just makes it so representative of this decade and what design did. What's very funny is I don't fit into most women's shoes. I exclusively wear men's shoes. And a lot of the footwear in this exhibition is actually for women. So I couldn't even dream of fitting into any of it.
Well, it might make it a little bit easier when you're looking at all this, so it'd be a more impartial curator.